do video games heard before, and that's because the issue is not a new one. In fact, it's over 25 years old. There's a movement that says that violent video games cause violent behaviors in people who play them. And actually, the movement says that we should hold responsible for these violent, deplorable acts committed by a very few people, the people who produce these games. Now, this movement started back in 1999 after the Columbine High School massacre, where both shooters were found to be avid players of both the violent video games Wolfenstein and Doom. Now, in Doom, the players would, in first person, use a vast array of weaponry to violently and very graphically cut their way through endless hordes of demons. How did we link the video games to the shootings, you ask? Well, in addition to the very violent behavior that people say desensitizes people to violence and makes them more likely to commit these acts, there were files found on the computers of both shooters that were custom levels for the game Doom. And in these custom levels were formats that exactly replicated the layout of the Columbine High School. This showed people that this plot had been thought of for months and months, and that the killers fantasized about what they would be doing. Now, in the years since, this movement has not died out. Quite the contrary, in fact. As in 2012, after the Sandy Hook shooting, people turned their ire once again to video games, as shown parents of a young child who say that guns cause all the trouble and wonder at the woe that is America's state that causes all this tragedy. While behind them, we see their child who, while playing an extremely violent video game, is chanting, kill them all. Now, other than the desensitization that these games are claimed to cause, and the files found on the computers of the two Columbine High School shooters, what causes people to follow this movement? Well, statistically, on the surface, it looks sound. As we see, people who play less violent video games typically show less hostile behavior than people who play more violent video games, and vice versa. Now, in school, we've all been taught that correlation does not always equal causation, as shown when the Greek government bonds were, and how much they were worth, correlated technically with the amount of active users on Facebook. So what can we see about violent video games and people that should be real? Well, if violent video games were actually causing people to commit violent acts, we should see them correlating with the amount of video game sales correlating with the amount of violent acts. But rather we see the opposite. In fact, as violent video game sales and video game sales in general have gone up, we see that the amount of violent acts have gone down. What does this mean for us? Well, let's think about it. In fact, the head professor of psychology at Villanova claims that video games have nothing to do with violent behavior at all. He says that humans have been committing violent acts since they became humans, and that these people who play violent video games and the people that commit these violent acts are just the crazies. So, how can we link the violent video games to violent crime if some people are just crazy? We can't. So, whatever you think about violent video games, whether you believe that they do cause violence or not, there is evidence out there that could support either way. And while I personally, as a video game player, have not committed any violent acts, I do see how some people could believe to the contrary. Thank you.